Hello and welcome. I'm Suzanne Siracuse, the CEO of Suzanne Siracuse Consulting Services, and I'm excited to be a part and lead the discussion on this limited series webcast, Connecting, Communicating, Leading, and Learning Through Crisis. I want to thank my partner, Tegra 118, for bringing this important conversation to life. I'm joined for this three-part series by Cheryl Nash, the CEO of Tegra 118, and our special industry guest today, Joe Nadreau, Managing Director of Wells Fargo Advisors. Thank you, Cheryl, for leading this important discussion, and Joe, for being here today to lend your insights, knowledge, and expertise to our discussion today. In only a few weeks, our industry has experienced a level of disruption that will change everything that had been the norm prior. Changes occurred in the way we conduct business, in the way employees do their work, and in the way consumers manage their finances. So having said that, I'd love to kick off our final webcast by focusing in on some of the areas that have pivoted effectively and ask, are they here to stay? So Joe, let's start with you. Wells Fargo has over 270,000 employees, and you now have 200,000 of them working from home. And of the nearly 15,000 Wells Fargo advisors, 90% are working from home. That's really remarkable and a pretty quick turnaround. So is remote working here to stay?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually think that's the $64,000 question. So if you were to ask me on March 1st, if I thought that Wells Fargo could get 90+% of their people working from home remotely, which would be an exact inverse of what it normally is, I would have said that that would be an impossibility. And so there's nothing like a global pandemic crisis to teach you what you can and can't do. So, we sit here now 6-8 weeks into this, and we're now largely all working from home where possible. And so the question then turns, is this the new norm, or is what we were at on January 1st the new norm? And I actually don't think it's an either or question. I think it's more of an and question. I think what you'll see within financial services, certainly within Wells Fargo advisors and throughout the financial services industry, but also just from a global perspective, I don't think it will be all remote or all back in the office. I think we will land on a new equilibrium. And now whether that new equilibrium is more towards the old or the new, I think every company will wrestle with what that looks like. And we're having those conversations now, but what I can fairly definitively say at this point is that it will end up somewhere in the middle. And I think we'll have a new normal, which will have pretty broad sweeping implications to the way we conduct business and operate on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And Cheryl, what's your viewpoint on remote working? Is it here to stay? Are you gonna make it a either or? Is it whatever people feel like? Do you even know yet?
So no, we don't know yet, but I do agree with Joe. I don't think it's 100% one way or the other. I do think that it's more accepting right now. I think there were companies in the past who said you can't work from home. Everybody needs to be on site. So this definitely is going to change a lot of that. But I don't see us moving 100% remote working or 100% back in the office. We were forced into this, like Joe said, and it was more like a forced experiment. And, for many organizations, we tested technology, we tested capabilities, we tested people's environment, and it's amazing how it worked. At least for our business, it's really worked well. And in my conversations with other CEOs, leaders across our industry, it's amazing to everyone how fast this change and this transformation happened. But I don't see us going to 100% remote working. I do think there is a need for people to be together, to be present. But there are companies like Twitter and others who've said that they will move to remote environments. But the future of work, and like Joe said, we're all thinking about what that is, how companies will be structured, how they're going to look at policies. All of that's going to change, even what floor plans will look like. So it's going to be an interesting next few months to figure all that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think will change for sure. So remote working, not 100% sure yet. What do you think is already a done deal? And how will those things potentially affect some of the legacy processes that your firms had in place prior to the crisis? Joe, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think first for us, I know from a business continuity planning perspective, everything that we had in place was very regionally based, meaning a hurricane was going to hit Florida. We would shift operations, we would shift staff to cover that away from the event. And that was really the extent of our continuity planning. So if something were going to happen to our Charlotte facility, our Salt Lake City and our St. Louis facilities would pick up the slack, or our offshore locations would pick up that volume. And while we did have some global pandemic planning, I don't think that they were terribly realistic, especially since we've seen what happens in a global pandemic, and us being prepared to shift from 90% on-site to 90% off-site was something that we hadn't planned, and we scrambled, right? And so I think going forward from just a BCP planning perspective, we now know that a global pandemic is real and the possibility is there, and therefore our technical processes and the possibility of us being at work one day and then working from home the next day is real, and we have to plan for that. So that's at the global macro level, but I think there are a lot of processes and procedures throughout the industry that are going to be questioned if we in fact have more people working from home, more people doing video collaboration. I think a lot of the regulatory policies that are currently in place will by definition have to get challenged and modified. And I think, being on the SIFMA board, I see that in real time, and there are a lot of things that will change. So something as simple as the registering and licensing of people in our industry, with Prometrics testing facilities being closed, that has been challenged, and that's been more difficult. And the mechanisms by which they do that will likely have to be modified.
Yeah, no, you brought up some really, really important points, and one that we haven't addressed on the webcast series as of yet, which is about some of those compliance or regulatory areas for advisors and for the firms that they work for. So right now, what is the position of SIFMA? Is it, let's wait and see? Is it, well, we know we can do this because we've had to?
No,
or can't you comment?
Obviously, I think the regulators have been very accommodating through this process. They have seen this in real time happening to us, and then they've modified some of their stance and policies. In our discussions at SIFMA, it has been, let's identify those areas that will be challenged in a new working environment like we're in now, and let's bring those to the forefront with the regulators and talk through what some possible long-term exceptions might be. I think we're in the infancy of that, and we'll see, some of that playing out in real time over the next 30 to 60 days.
Cheryl, how about you in terms of what are some things that you feel are here to stay based on what your firm has had to do since the COVID crisis?
So what's here to stay is the use of technology. The use of technology like this from a digital perspective, video conferences. Every day we had, daily meetings or, meetings in a conference room where you could have turned on video. We just didn't turn it on. We just used the speakerphone. So I think a lot of that's going to change. Also, I think firms looking at cost will also be something that, we need to really look at. Firms will look at how do they reduce operational expenses, how do they partner with their technology, or partner with, more internally to look at costs. We're also hearing from asset managers, they may want to do more in the outsourcing operations, working closely with back offices for tighter integration. I think from our perspective, and we're a technology organization, we need to step in and help our clients, because this is a time that everything's in play. And we're seeing that too. I mean, we were 3 months ago, we were bought by Motive Partners. We're in a joint venture. It's actually a great time, I think, for us to go through this, because as everybody's looking at their business, we're also looking at our business in a deep way. We're in the midst of a transformation, and we're looking at everything. So it's just an interesting time. And under new ownership in a pandemic, there's probably a lot of reasons why you would want to go in and look at the ways you're doing things and just make sure that you're doing things much more in line with what you need. So lots of good things are coming out of this. And I do think one of our biggest responsibilities is going to be to help our clients from a cost perspective and really look, broadly at what we do for them and how we can help them in more, in a lot more ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So the financial industry has been able to pivot rather quickly and effectively to serving clients, but many other industries have not had this luxury, and they haven't been able to keep their businesses intact the way that financial services has by working remotely. Examples are, like a restaurant where you need to be interacting. So are you able to get any kind of inspiration from some of these industries that haven't been able to pivot and incorporate that into the ways that you're thinking about how you may be doing business moving forward? Joe, I'd love to talk with you about that.
Sure. I'd actually highlight two different industries kind of at polar ends of the spectrum. One, I would highlight the medical profession. Very similar to that of financial services and financial advisors. They're having to do things like virtual office visits and meet with their patients in a very different means to deliver advice and guidance. And that's not terribly dissimilar to what our financial advisors are having to do with their clients. It's a very tumultuous market right now. And with this volatility, our clients want to be reassured. They want to review their plans. And so they're having to find new mechanisms through things like this, video collaboration, and just our digital tools. And I think that, similar to that of a doctor, our financial advisors, I think they're going to go down parallel paths, because even after the pandemic is over, I think these tools are here to stay and will be there to augment those practices on both sides of that. The other industry I'll highlight, and I think we've touched on it a little bit, is just commercial real estate, right? So I think that they're in for a pretty significant transformation. I mean, I think we hit on it, I don't think we're going back to the way we were, right? And whether we are 50% capacity, 80% capacity, the reality is I think people will be, at least in some part, working from home, which will significantly lower the footprint of commercial real estate in general. But even not just the footprint, just the functional space itself being more hotel cubes and things where people are going to be more transient than what they are today. And so I think the commercial real estate industry will be forced to kind of transform along with what the new normal will end up being. So two different industries, different ends of the spectrum.
No, those are great examples. And, the real estate industry has some really interesting implications on the financial advice industry. When you look at, an advisor's expenses, right? And if they are, it's usually staffing and real estate costs, right? For their offices. And if they are able to significantly reduce that real estate cost, what will that do to their margins? What will they use that savings for to reinvest in? Will technology be the beneficiary of that? Will next gen advisors be the beneficiary of that? So there's some really, I think, interesting implications that are going to happen based on what happens in the real estate industry across the board. Cheryl, how about you? What are you feeling are some of the industries that you're looking to see how they react and act as inspiration for how you're going to be handling things at Tegra 118?
I'm going to start with one that hit close to home. So the wedding industry. My son and his fiance were all set to get married July 10th this year, big wedding. And obviously that's not going to happen. But I've been watching them work with, they've actually also moved in with us because they were in a small 1-bedroom apartment. And there's a whole area for weddings that you can go look at, and you can create all this fun, whoops, I did it, we're going to do it again, or let's try this over, or, really, I'd say creative thinking. And I think that we have to bring that into some of the things that we're doing, how to be more creative, how to take some of those, we're in a different world. Things aren't going the way they're supposed to. I mean, we see this especially with conferences, and even we wanted a big first Tegra 118 client conference. That's not going to happen this year. Instead, we're going to go virtual. So all those things, and learning that, and how we can take some of that learnings from the wedding industry into our virtual conference, I think will be really interesting. And then my second one is teaching. My son's fiance is a kindergarten teacher, and she's actually in our basement right now, Zooming with her kids today. She's doing one-on-ones. She said from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock tonight, she's got one-on-one Zooms. And it's been so fun to watch her with these kids, because they're doing creative arts and crafts, they're doing quizzes, they're doing puzzles. And we're actually bringing some of that, obviously not at the kindergarten level, but bringing some of that creativity into some of the things we're doing with our teams, virtual happy hours, crazy hat day, just things like that. So I think we have to learn from all these different industries. I think everybody, look, I don't know if you guys watch any of the television shows like The Voice or American Idol,
Yep.
my favorite shows, but they went virtual at the last, 3 or 4 episodes. So it's just been an interesting thing to watch, and everybody's learning from each other.
Yeah, no, those are all great examples. And I think, you said it, and we talked a lot about this in episode 1, which is using creativity to be innovative and forcing yourself to think differently out of necessity, right? Not just because you want to do something different. And that's a really different way to think about it. So those are great examples. So I'd love to switch gears a little bit and talk about communication and communication strategies. And Joe, you have, as I mentioned before, 15,000 financial advisors at Wells Fargo. How have you adjusted the way that you're communicating with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at Wells Fargo Advisors, we've always prided ourselves in, bringing on an annual basis, we would typically bring 10,000 plus of our advisors over the course of the year into the home office, into St. Louis. And, it would be kind of a combination of training and making sure we're relaying strategy and best practices and things of that nature. And, in one fell swoop with COVID-19, that all evaporated virtually overnight. And so, we had to shift and become far more deliberate about communications than we ever have been. And so our managers in the field, our leadership team have all had to, change the mechanisms through which we communicate. And you can't have, it's very difficult as we've seen even on this call where you have, broadband challenges. It's very difficult to have hundreds of people in a Zoom meeting, whereas before you could put them in an auditorium. So you have to become far more decentralized from a communication standpoint than you historically have been. But it's been interesting because we've heard from the field and our home office team members that, our communication is actually being perceived as being better than it has historically been. And I think that's really because of the fact that we're having to be so deliberate about it. And, I'm sure, knock on wood, that we'll get back to an environment where we're sitting in an auditorium and getting back to those types of meetings. But I think that environment will get infused with this new deliberateness that we've introduced. And I think it'll enhance the way we're communicating over time. It is difficult. It's a challenge to use the new tools, but I think people are very quickly accepting of them and realize the benefits.
Yeah, no, it's those are great points, and you're seeing a trend of adoption, right? So their advisors and others, all of us, are forced to adopt certain technologies because we have no choice. we have to do it. So, and that's really changing up the communication, the way that we communicate, et cetera. I mean, I think that we're finding that across the board in everyone that we talk to, and especially in leadership roles like yourself, where you're communicating maybe more frequently as well, more frequently and more deliberately. So Cheryl, how about you? How have you changed up how you're communicating to your clients? And, what are some of the biggest changes and, quite frankly, challenges, other than broadband, which we all know is a challenge?
I really like Joe's word deliberate, because you do have an opportunity to step back and be really deliberate in everything that you're doing. We're, is March, when you think about the time we're in, February 19th, we announced that we are a new company. We had a lot of expectations, client in-person meetings, client road shows. We had, we were so excited to introduce our new partners to our clients. And when you think about now, when we're not getting on planes and we're not meeting face to face, we're still doing that, although it's all virtual. In fact, we did one with Joe and his team, which was a virtual client roadshow. So we're still doing that, but it is more deliberate. I do miss the face to face shaking hands. I think that's always, something this doesn't, you don't get that for even the hugging. But one of the things that, I think our industry needs to think about, and, Joe said that the conferences, I mean, we as a technology firm did a lot of conferences. We actually networked at those conferences. It was a great opportunity to go to a place and, see 10 of your clients, take them out to dinner. We really counted on that. So that's different. That will be different for us. And I miss that. So we're going to have to figure out what we do about that, because we would set breakfasts up. We'd have executive advisory boards. We really leveraged those conferences and networking because we always went to the same conferences our clients did. So that's going to be one area, I think, one challenge that we're going to have to overcome and figure out what we do in the meantime. We've also, we listened to virtual conferences. MMI's done a great job with their virtual conferences. I've had some board meetings, the MMI board meeting, even our first Tegra 118 board meeting was via Zoom. So it's really an interesting time. And I think that video conferencing, I think, being deliberate, I think, how we talk about ourselves, how we put our message out, how we use social media, all of those are much more important now than they ever were, because it's the means to communicate.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I think is really critical about our industry, and especially around financial advisors and the way they are with their clients, et cetera, is relationships.
Yeah.
And I think it's harder to establish that relationship when you're virtual versus
Yes.
that in-person dynamic. So it'll be interesting to see how that really changes the way that business may change, because it's maybe going to become more virtual in the future.
Right.
So moving forward in kind of our new normal world is really going to require a new perspective from most executives regarding shifting priorities and, quite frankly, the deployment of resources to support those priorities, right? So can you talk about a new priority that has emerged since the crisis, and if that's going to impact other initiatives that you had planned? Kind of a loaded question, but I think very interesting. Joe, I'd love to kick it off with you, right? So are there some things that are going to take precedence now and that maybe others are not going to have as high a priority?
I wouldn't classify it as necessarily a new priority. What I would say is we see accelerating priorities. So what I mean by that is, and you kind of hit on it earlier, of, we knew that the industry would shift to having more video conferencing capability. We knew that there was going to be more digital collaboration. What I think COVID-19 has done is accelerated that by 3 to 4 years, right? So,
Yep.
We've now experienced in 3 to 4 months what I think would have taken, from an adoption perspective, multiple years. And so when we talk about shifting priorities, I think what we now see is, hey, we need to make sure that all of our offices have adequate broadband access to the network. We need to make sure that all of our advisors have video conferencing capability that they can easily use. we need to build more digital collaboration tools so that our advisors and clients can collaborate in that digital space, knowing that they're not going to be as in person as they have historically been. And so while that has been on our roadmap, I really do think that this latest pandemic has accelerated the need for that. And, what used to be functional requests coming from our advisors and clients are now much more so about connectivity requests. And so we're shifting our priorities to make sure that we have that access available to them.
No, that makes complete sense. Cheryl, what about you? Are there, obviously, as you mentioned, you came out with an entirely new brand, new owner, like a month before all of this happened. So you had all of these things planned that were lots of in-person. So I imagine those priorities shifted in a different way. But are there other things that are now taking precedent that you're saying, this is what we're going to be focused on based on kind of where we are in our new world?
There definitely are. I think one of the new priorities that everybody's thinking about is how do we do more with less? And how do we look across our processes, and how do we look across what we're doing today, and how do we automate some of those? So we're doing that both internally and then how we support our clients. But one of the most interesting things that we learned through this crisis was when the market volatility started, we got more client requests in to help with some things that in the normal day we wouldn't be asked to help with. So help with answering advisor calls, help with onboarding some of the accounts, help with strategy model changes. So we got asked to do things that we never have been asked to do. And the greatest thing was we had our product team actually in the, sitting, in via conference with our clients, and they're the ones who write the specs and actually put product to market. So we learned a lot. We learned about trading. We learned about ways we can automate some of the things that aren't as automated as they could be. We actually moved up some things in the roadmap around automation, APIs. Clients are really looking for more data. We moved up how we accelerate some of our experience, our client experience, our user experience. And then ultimately, we're really focused on how do we help our clients with the front office capabilities around proposal, planning, retirement, all those things that are really important right now. And, we've seen that there's a lot of need for that. So it's been interesting. We've learned a lot. And with our new partners Motive, we just can't take this learning and not do something with it. So it's been great because they're investing in us. They're helping us get some resources that can do things faster. And there has just been a lot of great learnings from this, of how we as a technology company need to really help our clients and be better and really give them opportunities where they can do more with less.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And I didn't know that. That's like kind of really learning on the fly, right? Where you put the people that are developing out the product and the solution, sometimes there's a disconnect between what's being developed and what is actually needed immediately. And so to marry those two together, what a fantastic opportunity for your product team.
It was great. And we quickly put a task force in place, and it slowed down the requests that have come in, but that task force was to answer questions faster and to give quick turnaround faster on things that clients needed in this market volatility. We saw sometimes in March we saw 5 times more trades than normal. So a lot of good work there, and we worked very closely with our clients to make sure that what they were doing was, we were able to support them through that.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. So many believe that now is the time, speaking of, to use the level of disruption to reinvent themselves both internally and externally. How are you using AI and analytics to improve the customer experience? Cheryl, I'd love to, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to get a little bit deeper with you on that.
So we are, I'd say in our new world, our big focus is on innovation. We actually brought in a data scientist who was part of one of the Motive companies. We're looking at the data across our platform. We're looking at how do we analyze it, what is important to our clients, what trends do they want to see, how can we give them that data. We sit on so much data today that we really don't take that data and give it to our clients in a meaningful way. So that's one thing that we're doing. And I think especially now clients are really interested in how many of my accounts, are 60% in cash, how many of my accounts got out of equities and went into fixed income, a lot of questions like that. So we're putting that data together to give clients a better, look at their own business, their own accounts. We're also looking at, how do we, from an innovation perspective, how do we become more collaborative with our clients? So Motive Partners does a great job of client centricity. They have a, very collaborative approach, and we're working very closely with them on, really taking that out to the industry and to our clients, and co-creating with them in areas that are really important. So thinking about the future, being proactive, not really, we've been in this cycle of, taking in requests, getting those requests done, but you don't get out of that. So you could be, really innovative, and that's really where we're going. We want to get out of that and be more innovative. And this crisis is helping us because it's giving us the ability to focus on what's most important.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. That's exactly what we all should be thinking about now, right?
Yeah.
So Joe, one of the many roles that you have is that you oversee all platform technology for Wells Fargo advisors. I can't even imagine how many emails you get. What are the biggest takeaways that you have learned so far from using data, from partnering with other tech firms that may change the way you operate?
Yeah, I think Cheryl hit on it. I think the financial services industry in general is woefully behind a lot of other industries. We are sitting on a lot of client data that we have not effectively used, right? And the intent is, how do you take that data kind of from disparate sources, combine it with artificial intelligence to provide meaningful predictive analytics and insights to our clients and our advisors to better serve our clients, right? And I just don't think we've done that very well. And the expectations of our clients are being set far beyond the bounds of financial services. They're the ones who are on Amazon every day and getting the next best book. And, people who looked at this often looked at this. We have data that could be so valuable in providing insights to our clients. Even something as simple as, we've noticed that you've been spending more on Starbucks on a monthly basis. I mean, you could do a lot of information in a valuable and meaningful way to those clients. And we're starting down that path. It's in its very early stages of that. But I do believe, and I've said this in the past as well, that this is kind of the next frontier as far as I'm concerned in financial services, because we do have such strong data that could be used in much more meaningful ways.
I am fascinated by something you just said, which is to be able to provide recommendations almost to clients about, well, you go to Starbucks X amount of time per week. You're spending on average X. Now, you can kind of get that already in a small form with like an American Express card. But if you were to say, if you were to get a Starbucks card, that would save you $10 a month or something like that. So being able to have, to provide real like savings ideas, and then also maybe pass that information on to Starbucks to say, oh, you guys should be creating a card that helps people that spend X amount of dollars per month with you, and this is what it'll do for them, this is what it'll do for you. Is that the kind of thing that you're referring to?
It's endless, the ideas that you could have. So you could identify, when somebody's bonds are coming due, that you want to make sure that the advisor is aware that they're going to have cash in the account. You could talk about spending patterns and notice that their electric bill is significantly higher this month than it has been for the 12 months prior. Are they aware of that? And just, there are insights that you can provide. You don't want to overwhelm. And so the trick is going to be, how do you use that in a way that is meaningful for that particular client, in a way that adds value? And I think we have the data to do that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What a great opportunity, So what about you? You have something called the Intuitive Investor Digital Advice Call Center, right? So, and you oversee that as well. What kind of insights are you gleaning from that call center that can maybe marry back to some of the data that and analytics that we were just talking about?
Yeah, so let me just describe what that is a little bit. And that is, we have, obviously Wells Fargo Advisors is connected to the Wells Fargo environment and the consumer bank that operates there. And, they have 70 million plus clients at the bank, a lot of which are emerging affluent deposit-based relationships that are beginning to, determine whether they want to move from a purely deposit-based relationship into investing. And the idea of Intuitive Investor is to say, hey, we don't want you just randomly picking a couple of stocks that you like and not being diversified, but this is how can we profile you as a client and put you into the appropriate asset allocation and auto rebalance that over time so that you're effectively diversified in a very cost-efficient portfolio. But the reason why, what we're probably the biggest lesson learned is, if you're a pure robo play, you're probably not going to survive the long haul because people want interaction with humans. And if you're a firm that is entirely human advice based with not embracing technology, you're probably not going to survive. And so we believe at the end of the day, the right answer is a hybrid approach where technology is married with human advice. And that is kind of a first foray for these emerging affluent clients to be able to leverage that technology while still having the ability to call in and speak to a human to get broader understanding where they're not comfortable. And so I think the biggest takeaway from me in this advice offering is that I think it needs to be married with both.
Yeah, no, I mean, couldn't agree more. And that seems to be the consensus too. So there are so many factors that actually go into moving into the next phase of this crisis. And one of the major ones is balancing that getting back to work into a routine with managing the new stresses your employees and advisors are experiencing. So how are you both balancing the health and safety of your employees with needing to get back to business? Cheryl, I'd love to start with you.
So we haven't stopped going back to business. I think we like probably Joe, our teams are working harder than ever. And there's even, stats out there that people are working 3 hours more a day because they're not sitting in their car and traveling. But I think, everybody's wondering what's next. When do we go back? One of the things that I did was I sent a notice out to our entire organization and let them know that at least through Labor Day, everybody's working from home. And I think what that does is it gets people, maybe off the dining room table and into more of an office. It gives them more ability to think about what do I need to do the next 3 months, knowing that I'm going to be at home. And before it was month to month, and that I think drove people crazy because they just didn't settle. Now they're settled into their home office. So I think that's one thing that we did. We're also, our head of HR, she's done a great job putting out messages. She just put one out this week that talked about mental health, well-being, trying to support each other. Some people feel like they have to be on 24/7. We have a support line. We've got some resources there. So she called that out and, being very, supportive, encouraging time off. It's hard to take time off today. So how do you encourage people to step away for a day, not log into their computer? So those types of things, we're really trying to do because the balance is hard now, just because you're in the same place all day long. So it's really more of telling people it's okay, making sure that you're giving them permission, and then making sure that you're listening. And if people are stressed out, give them avenues to talk to, but also giving them clarity that, this is what we're doing. Here's our plan, at least through Labor Day. So now they at least know that they have to get themselves settled.
Yeah, no, that's great. You can tell you really care about your team. Joe, what about you? I mean, Wells Fargo is a huge organization. How are you guys balancing this? When is it time to go back? When do people feel comfortable? How are you guys handling that right now?
Really not dissimilar from Cheryl at all. I would say I'm very proud of Wells Fargo as a company and as a whole. They have been extraordinarily generous to their employees throughout this process. They have definitely put their health and safety, at the forefront, and have really put their money where their mouth is. And really, every action that they've taken, I can sit back and say I'm proud of the decisions that were made. And so it's easy to be a team member when you feel that. Now, with that said, I really am not in a race at all to get my team back in the office, right? Because I think that there are a lot of constraints, right? Everybody is in a different world. For me, I'm working from home, and my children, I have 3 teenagers, they're all older and relatively self-sufficient, an occasional brush up between my 2 teenage boys, but otherwise, not really that bad. But I'm also on Zoom calls with people who have small children that they're trying to homeschool, and now that they're out of school, trying to entertain because there is no daycare. That's a tough environment, right? And so all of those things become factors. But I think we'll go back in waves, and we'll figure out slowly but surely what that new normal is. But we don't even have a date in mind at this point, and we're in no rush to do so, because we want people to feel comfortable and not scared of being back in the office. And we're taking, all of the necessary precautions. And as an operating committee, we debate on a daily basis what that will look like when people do start to trickle back to the office. Do we do temperature checks? Do we force people to wear masks? All of the same questions that everybody on this call and everybody in the industry, and frankly, everybody in the country is wrestling with right now. And, I don't feel like we are the local restaurant that needs to get people back into their physical space. We can be a laggard and help for the community safety by doing so. So, people often ask me, including my people, what that date looks like, and we don't have one, and we are in no hurry to create one.
Joe, I love that. Because I think, and I actually you've said this before, that you don't want to be race to number 1 back in the office. No reason for that. Think about how much that would cost if we all went back too early and people got sick, right? I mean, it costs a lot more than it does when you're, doing this from home. But I do agree with that. I think we're keeping track, making sure our people are safe, and I think that's the way we all need to be right now.
Well, kudos to both of you and your leadership, and doing the right thing by your teams and your companies, because a lot of it's affecting people in very different ways. And Joe, your point is so well taken with some of the people that have young children. And if you think it's hard and you have either no children or grown children, I can't imagine balancing everything that you need to do from a professional standpoint with trying to figure out how you're gonna occupy your kids' time. So kudos to both of you and to your firms. Joe, you alluded to it already about kind of the biggest lesson that you've learned so far through this process of the marriage between digital and human touch. Cheryl, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned you feel important to share with the people that are listening right now?
I think the biggest lesson is around listening to your clients more. So we've always been listening to our clients, but I don't think we've listened to the point of asking that next question. All right, so you're telling me this. How do we help you? What does it look like today? How do we make sure that it looks like it needs to look like? So one of our biggest lessons, and it's even, I think it's easier in an odd way because we're doing it over video and we're asking the right questions and we're getting some support on that. But that's one of my biggest lessons is not just ask a question, but go deep and make sure you understand it and then come out on the other end with how you actually help either that process or that function or what your client's asking you to do. So this has been a really good experience for us, just listening. It's a good time to just listen.
That's great. And Joe, did you want to add anything to kind of the last takeaway before we conclude?
No, I would say the biggest lesson I've learned is that you can, in fact, wear a button-down dress shirt with sweatpants and slippers. But aside from that, I think the biggest lesson for us is that the idea of a global pandemic is real. And as a result, we have to be remote enough and capable enough to deal with it. And I think if you would have asked us that 3 months ago, the answer would have been no. But if this were to happen again, I think we will be ready.
Yeah, it's truly amazing what has happened in such a short period of time. I was saying on a prior episode that I had seen Cheryl at an industry event a couple months ago, and who would have thought that this is how we were going to be communicating back and forth for God knows how long, right?
How long,
so
yeah.
you just don't know, and nothing's a certainty any longer. So this has been fantastic. What I'd love to do, what I like to do at the end of each one of these, this is our final a webcast that we're doing in this series, is to add a little bit of levity to the conversation, bring it down to a real personal level, and ask you, Joe, when it's safe to travel, and after you see all your friends and family, what's the first vacation that you'd like to go on?
That's actually a really great question. I actually have the benefit of the first week of March. There was a group of my childhood friends who are all turning 50 this year, and so we chartered a catamaran and sailed through the British Virgin Islands, and I came back into this chaos, right? So I left and it was kind of on the periphery, and I came back straight into people wearing masks in the airport. And so I was lucky enough to get in one last vacation right before that. And I would definitely say I miss seeing my parents and my brother and his kids and my friends. But after I did all that, just to be back on a beach, because living in the middle of the country in St. Louis, where it's been very rainy this spring, I'm anxious to see the sun and sit on a beach really anywhere.
Well, ironically, first of all, that sounds amazing. When in the first episode we talked to Bert White, and he had said he wanted to go to the Soggy Dollar Bar on Joost Van Dyke, and so if you were sailing through the BVI's, I'm wondering if you were there.
We were there.
That's great. Or Foxy's, right? For those of you listening, if you haven't gone to the BVI's, it's a must stop.
It is great. It's a beautiful place. I'd love to go back.
God, what a complete opposite, going from the openness and freeness of a beach and a catamaran to coming back to what you came back to. At least you hopefully had some rest, because it's been a busy couple months for us all. And Cheryl, I know I asked you this question with the last episode, and you said Italy. So what would be the second place that you'd like to go?
So I'm with Joe. So you said without family, my second place is rent a big house in Temecula, California, bring my entire family with my cousin, with our grandkids of my mom's, and have a big party. Big party. That's what I want to do. We did that a couple of years ago, and it was just so much fun. So want to do something like that after I get back from Italy, of course.
That's great. I want to go on one of my bucket list trips, which is, I was supposed to go 2 years ago. It didn't work out, but to go to Easter Island, which is basically in the middle of nowhere, to go see somewhere that would, is so remote. I think that I got to put that back on my agenda as soon as we're able to travel. Long flight though. So in any case, I have to tell you, I've learned so much from talking to you, Cheryl, and all of our guests through this webcast series. It was really terrific, and I really want to thank you, Joe, for joining us today. So much has been learned. I feel like we're coming out of this smarter, better business leaders, and I really believe that some of the insights that you both shared today will really act as guidance and support for the many others that are listening as they navigate through this ever-evolving business landscape. So thanks again for watching and for listening, and stay safe.